one. Normally, when you go there, you normally will just type the topic and to give you related papers with respect to the regions. That's what I was trying to.
Okay, so Doc, maybe after
okay. I think this is it. I'm coming. Kwame, you try that for me, and before I go, okay, I think I've seen it. You type search, okay? You type search.carrot2, search.carrot2.org, search.carrot2 as a figure.
Figure 2.
Let me try to take a screenshot. Kwame, you can share that in a group.
Okay,
I think
so
those of you want to.
Yeah, I think I just found it. So I'll send a link to the group and also a screenshot.
You've seen it, okay.
Yeah, I've seen it. Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, that's why you can also, those of you want to do review papers, you can use that search engine. You go there, you type your topic. It can give you a lot of related papers with respect to certain regions. That's one. You can try that one too for your richer review papers. Okay.
Okay. So Doc, now we are going to the methodology. So the question is very simple, but then I'm not sure how simple the answer will be. How do you choose the right methodology for your analysis?
Oh, okay. Let me start from this. Before the selection of your methodology actually based on your research objectives. That is when we come from that background. And later, I will also give you certain instances as to which appropriate. If you are like an economics student, you also will notice that there are certain factors you need to consider before you can set on a particular method. But what you should bear in mind is that your research objectives also determines the method you use. You have to bear that one in mind.
Okay.
Even though there are other things you can also consider before considering the method. But generally, your objective will determine the method you will use. So what you have to understand, once you have your research topic, you should be able to come up with objectives. So those specific objectives, because let's say you have a general research, your general research question or objective might come from the problem, the reason why you are studying, you are conducting that study. So once you have the general objective for your study, you then will ask specific questions. So those specific questions that you are asking is all in an attempt of answering the general objective. So your specific objectives is what will be developed into questions. So if you have the general objective of your study, you then will develop a specific objective. Then the specific objectives will be translated into what? Questions. So once you have this established, then you will determine that if I take this specific objective, what method is it appropriate for me to use? You understand? If I take this particular objective, what's the appropriate method for me to use? You understand? So normally, is the objectives that will help you to determine this. But normally, let me get away from the economics part. Let me talk about generally those from other humanities. Sometimes what you need to understand is there's the research method. The approach for the research, we have the quantitative and qualitative approach. Okay. Then a combination of them will be what? A mixed approach. So if you take the quantitative approach, we have the modeling. The modeling. So a lot of us coming from econometrics, those of us from economics background, those of us coming from economics background, we might fall on the modeling aspect, even though now economics, they include behavioral economics, of which you can also use experimenting. Okay, those people, the other section of economics that deals with what? experimental behavioral economics. Those people will be doing experimental approach. So what you have to understand is that the quantitative approach can be classified into three. Let's look at it. So we have the modeling part, we have the observation, then we have the experimental. Okay. Then aside that, we'll have what? The quantitative approach. Later we'll talk about which other means we can use in conducting in using the quantitative approach. But so what you have to understand is that if you are modeling, then it means that means you are using econometric approach, okay, or statistics. With this, once you have your specific objectives, you know that I'm going to use this. Let's say you want to know the impact of this on this, or the relationship on this on that. So in that, let's say you want to say, oh, impact of FDI on economic growth, or I want to know the relationship between FDI and economic growth. So that is your objective, to assess the relationship between FDI and economic growth. You have established that. Now you have to know that this approach, this objective, you have to then decide which method you have to use. So with those so fast, that will be modeling. Now, when we do our modeling, there are certain conditions that we need to fulfill in order for us to use a particular method. Sometimes you will, when you have your data and you do the diagnosis test and you know that you have certain problems with your data, then that one will lead you into what? Using what? A particular data set. Imagine you have a data, a second data. Then when you conducted a test on it, let's say you conducted BDS test. The BDS test is just to help you to determine whether there's a non-linear relationship between FDI and growth, or there's non-linear dependency in your variables. So once you do that test on that your variable, and you establish that there's non-linear dependency within your variable, within your time series, then it means that you have to use a particular approach. Then you are going to use Gauch, there's those kind of method. You understand? So what you have to understand is that once you have the specific objectives, and then if you're an economic student, you are doing your modeling, there are certain conditions you also need to meet before you can then say that, oh, this method will be efficient to use. You understand? Because once you say, oh, I want to assess the relationship between FDI and economic, it's a linear relationship. But what if you want to look at non-linear? You want to look at when it starts increasing at a certain speed, or when your data is increasing at you want to look at non-linearity of it. There's also a method you need to what? You need to conduct certain tests. Once you conduct those tests and you find out that, oh, those situations exist within your variables, then you have to then use what? An appropriate method that will produce what? Efficient results. That's what you need to understand. So once you know your objectives, you then have to then perform other tests to know that, oh, using this particular test is appropriate. It's just like this. Let's say you want to examine impact of FDI or the relationship between FDI and economic growth, and then you are going to use OLS to do this. Then after you conduct, you perform OLS tests on this, then you also notice that your variable, you have a problem with normal distribution. It means that your result with the result that you have, the result of the OLS is it's not what? It is misleading. Once you have identified that problem, that there's what? A problem with normal distribution. It is not appropriate. Your results that you are getting from OLS is what? Misleading. So you have to then use another method. So what you have to understand as a researcher, now that you have been able to identify this problem with the data and knowing that the OLS result is misleading, then you have to follow on what? Efficient. So if there's a problem with normal distribution, you can then use what? Quantile regression. That solves that. Quantile regression solves the problem of what? Non-linearity amongst our distribution of our data. So that's what you need to understand in choosing the method Our later will come. I will come to those of us from the humanities, because what I'm talking is purely to those who are using statistics and econometrics. You have to do all this kind of stuff. So, like I said, if you do BDL tests and you say, oh, the non-linear dependency in time series that you are using, it means that your problems has a problem. Your data has a problem that you cannot use a linear model to what? Linear approach to assess your situation. You then have to catch those they solve problems of certain errors. So that's what you have to understand. Now let me come to the humanities, like those who are doing psychology, marketing. They don't use rigorous econometrics. Those of our colleagues who also don't use rigorous econometrics and statistics. Then this is what they have to do. You have to always fall on what? They have to then decide whether they are going to use observation or experimental, or they are going to use modeling, but they are going to also combine, also rely on what qualitative approach. So if you use qualitative and quantitative, it means that you are using what? A mixed approach. So when you combine the two, then you are using what? Mixed approach. So your work can be purely quantitative or qualitative. By a combination of qualitative and quantitative, you are using what? A mixed approach. So normally with PhD research, you are sometimes encouraged to what? Do this mixed method approach, where you have to do a field survey and also use a secondary data in your analysis. It's good. It gives you more sufficient result and more robust results. That is one. But with those who use purely qualitative approach, then there are means they also need to what? Collect their data. Okay? There are means that they need to use to what? Collect their data. So it means that if you are using, let's look at those who will be doing observation. Their work is quantitative approach, but it's observation. If you look at our brothers from the science field, science, okay, most of the science students do observational studies, like a Greek student, the pure agric science student. Look at what they do. They go and plant something, then observe the growth of the plants for over time, and then they will use the information they will get to do some statistical thing. That is what observation, they can use that observation approach. Some of them also do experimentation. They experiment the thing. Oh, if I take this and I do this and I control this variable, what happened? That's what experimentation approach. All these are what? Form of what? Quantitative approach. And then I'm saying that in economics now, we have some people who are also using experimental approach, like those who are doing behavioral economics. If you are doing behavioral economics, I think behavioral economics and those who also do labor economics, I think most of those people normally rely on this experimental stuff. And no, the behavioral economics is economics from psychology. See, so you want to talk about human behavior, but they look at the psyche or aspect of it. So they do more of what? Experimental studies. That is that. Then let's go to qualitative approach. With a qualitative approach, with that one, you just have to transcribe the information you get. So you are not doing any statistical analysis here. You are transcribing the information you get from your respondent. That's what you are reporting. So with that one, you have so many ways of getting your information if you are doing the qualitative approach. One is that you do interview. So once you are interviewing the people, you are getting their response, and those response, you are going to transcribe them to explain the phenomenon you are talking about. Then also, you can also talk about, you can also consider what we call focus group discussion. With a focus group discussion, you, the researcher, engage experts in that particular field, and you lead them into conversation. So what it means that you just introduce them into a conversation, and those experts will start talking about the issue and bring up everything that you need. And you rely on those information from those experts in your research. That's focus group discussion. That's for those who will be doing qualitative research. Then you can also do what we call again participatory approach. It's more or less like an observation, but participative. It means that whatever that you, the researcher, if you are doing a quantitative approach, you also want to what? Be part of you want to what? Experience the thing. You want to have an experience. So what you do is that you get yourself engaged with the activities that your samples are into. Then at the end of the day, you come out with a report, participatory. You see, so that one is quite different from the observational stuff. You can observe, even in the qualitative, you can also observe. But if you come to the agricultural science, they just plant the thing, they have a lot of. But if you look at the qualitative aspect, you can be part of the activities of your sample and then write a report on it. You understand? So that would be the distance. So it's either you as a researcher, you combine these two, or you settle on one. But combine the two actually give you more robust outcome. And I'm saying that even with PhD students, you are encouraged to use mixed method approach. You have to do those survey things, you have to look at the micro and macro at the same time.
Okay, Doc.
Is there any question?
Yeah, for some clarification. Now, when choosing the methodologies, you said it should be based on the research questions. So maybe we have to decide that based on our research question, are we going to do a qualitative analysis or quantitative or mixed, right?
Yeah, you see, your topic will determine your source of data. That's why I'm saying that. That's what initially I said that in deciding your research topic, one of the factors you also need to consider is the feasibility of your study. And what will make it feasible for you to carry out your study is data, resources. So if you have access to data, it means that your study is feasible. So you as a researcher, once you come out with that, you have an idea of your topic, you then will decide, am I going to use a primary data? Am I going to use a secondary data? If I'm going to use a primary data, what are the ethical considerations? What are the requirements? What am I restricted? What am I required to do? What am I not to do? You understand? So if you are going to go to the field and collect data, I can use myself as an example, My doctoral studies was based on China, and I did some survey. I did both qualitative and I used a mixed method. Let me say it this way. And I remember when we did the initial test of the questionnaires, when I did the initial test of the question, my professor called me and said, "Oh, with Chinese, there are certain questions you might not ask. You have to add this, you have to keep that question somewhere because certain questions is very sensitive. And once you are a foreigner and they know you are asking that question, they will not give you a proper response. You understand? So that's ethical. There are certain questions you are required to ask. There are certain things you are not required. So you have to look at the ethical consideration of your topic, the topic that you are considering. I remember I wanted to also conduct a study with land mortgage in China here. People, what they do is that farmers give their land to individuals, the rich, on loan. They take a loan from them, then they will farm for the people. So when they produce, it's time for them to harvest, then the rich people will just go and harvest those things. They call it land something. I remember I went to their office. I wanted to get some information. By the time I would leave the office, my professor called me and asked me, "Oh, that area, do you know the land issue here is very sensitive? You don't need to talk about land issues." So then I just went there. I needed some information to work on a certain paper I want to publish. So it means that when you want to conduct a survey study, like if you want to use a primary data or something, you want to go to the field or you want to get access to certain data, there are certain things you are restricted from, or you have to meet certain requirements before you can have access to what? Data set. You understand? Recently, I wanted to get data from Ghana Statistical Service. They gave me a form, and they told me that I should make sure that the data they are going to give me is strictly for academic purpose. So you see, so that's ethical consideration. You know that they are also restricting you. They are giving a certain requirement you need to meet. You know, there are some institutions when you get information from them and you use the information in your paper, they will ask you not to give out their data. Okay, give out their data. Let me give an example of the ethical consideration. Those of you doing PhD, notice that when you are uploading your, I don't know for the master student, but I think I know for the PhD student, when you are uploading your thesis, your final thesis, of course, into the system, they will ask you when they should make your work public. They'll ask you when do you want them to make your information public, or were you financed by other institutions? So because of that, your thesis cannot be shared, or cannot be made public, and other stuff. There are certain things they give. So those things are all ethical considerations. So what you have to understand is that once you get your topic, your data, your source of data is very important. Your source of data is very, very important. So once you get the data, then you also can then go ahead and then do your research. As those of us in the economics, I think that if you want to conduct any study, once you are able to come up with your topic, the next issue for you is to make sure that you have data for it. If you don't have data, then you have to leave that topic alone. Yeah, you always make sure that if you want to conduct any research that you want to conduct, once you settle on a topic, your next thing you should do is that go and get your data. Just go and get your data. Once you get your data, you can then be doing your literature review and that stuff, then start doing your write-up. If you just get a topic and start writing and do literature review and get methodology before looking for your data and you're not able to get your data, it means you have wasted your time. The data is very important. So once you get your topic, or even in the process of settling on the topic, make sure that you have gotten data. Without data, the topic is nothing. That's what I think. Yeah, because sometimes even when you have a set of data, okay, then you can even you yourself, you can even frame a topic and then go into literature to find whether your topic that you have framed is even novel. It has some originality before you can even go ahead to conduct the study. Okay, I think one last thing before you come with any question, let me tell you this. With respect to the selection, I forgot to add that in selecting a topic, one of the things you can also do is that those of you who don't read policy reports, okay, you have to be reading that. Okay, you have to take policy reports. You can go to World Bank, read their publications, those reports they see there. You can go and read World Investment Reports. You can go to IMF, their reports on certain issues, read those reports. Once you read a report, you are able to what? Identify research area. If you want to work on climate change, go to Food and Agriculture Organization. They have a lot of publication they give out there. Go and download any paper that you think is of your interest to you. Read the report. You'll be able to what? Identify those, come out with a topic from there. Because once you are reading, you will develop interest in a particular area. Oh, this thing, I have interest in this. You get it. So I think it's in also selecting a topic, we should widen our scope and also considering other things. That's why sometimes even some students even get funding, because maybe you go and read a report by Danida, and when you read their report, you're able to identify a problem given their report. You can then approach them that they should fund you for that project, so that you conduct that project, then they give you funding. So there are so many ways you can get a research topic and work on. You have to make sure that you read reports of certain institutions, because they are actually on the field. Some of them are there, they are getting you what's actually happening than what you are in the school reading, doing your reading. They will give you the practical instances. So you should also get access to their reports and be able to come up with certain research topic. It's better. Yeah. Any other question?
Okay, so Doug, still on the methodology part, I have personally had an experience whereby I have seen people using, let's say, linear models on data sets that are non-linear. or sometimes you see someone using an OLS regression on an ordinal kind of data, whether their dependent variable is ordinal, but then they are just running an OLS regression, like the common regress and the variables continuous. I've also seen people working with panel data, and without no reason, they start doing certain kind of analysis. So let's say you have data. Let's say you have data. Should you be concerned about the unit of measurement of your dependent variables before you choose a model? And which models fit which data set?
Okay. Before I answer your question, what you need to understand is that in identifying your research gap, I told you a lot of things you need to do. It's either you look at the problem, the old problem and a new problem, or you look at the existing problem and you look at the different ways of solving that same problem, or you look at the problem that has been going, the method they've used, and how you also want to use different methods in analyzing that. Okay, so this is what happened. When someone is reviewing your paper, okay, first of all, if they want to determine whether your paper is novel, okay, let's look at what makes your paper novel. Even though we have been able to identify instances based on that, we can say that our paper is novel. But when someone takes your paper, okay, and want to determine whether your paper is novel, one is, how complex is it? See, complexity is very important. See, the complexity of your work also make your paper or your thesis novel. You understand? Because it's like you're coming up with a different approach. Let's say everybody has been using OLS. All of a sudden, you came up with a different approach anyway. That's a novelty. So the complexity of your work also makes your work novel. Then also you have to look at unfamiliarity of your work. Unfamiliarity of your work. You see, particular area, the same area, but you can see that what you are bringing, it is not familiar. Maybe it's familiar in a particular field, but in that field, it is unfamiliar. That is what? Novelty. So it's like once you are reading the literature, you also go outside your scope to look at other fields which you think it is related, and look at what others are doing. And you look at how that thing or the approach they are using in solving that particular problem can be used in that your field. The unfamiliarity of that approach alone is what? It's novel. Okay, let me give an example. I will not mention any name. Okay, I will not mention any name. Let me tell you something. There was one particular school. Let me put it in there. There was one particular school I used to read student work from there, and I know people from there. So one day I called the person. I said, you people, it's like your students who are graduating, they are all using one approach in their in doing the analysis. All the approach that they are using is this particular approach. Is that the only thing you guys have taught them? Then the lecturer started laughing. You understand? So it means that the econometrics lecturer who is teaching them also maybe that is where he's very strong. So he teach them that particular method, and almost all of them were using the same approach. Honestly, you understand? So it means that if you're a student there, you can be different. You can also use a different approach in solving that same problem. And that makes you then unfamiliar and also novel. So novelty can be looked at from that end. Then also you look at what's the value? The impact of your study. The impact of your study is very important. The impact of your study is very, very important. Like, some research work doesn't have any value. Maybe scientifically, maybe socially it might have some value, but scientifically it might not have. So when someone look at your work, there are certain things they can just look at it, so this work is of no value. So now let's come to your methodology. The method, as for the method, like I said, when you take your data, okay, when you have your data, you have to understand that given your objective, given the objective of your research. There are so many, there are about 3 methods that you can use to analyze that particular method. But what you have to understand is that you have to check whether there are certain problems that you identify with a time series or panel data. Those problems don't exist. If those problems exist, okay, let's say those problems exist, or some of the problems exist with your data, what do? You then will look at the estimation techniques. Which of them you think is more appropriate for you to use? So with the method, it always has to do with the problem you find with your data. That's why I told you that if you use OLS and then you do diagnostic tests and you have a problem with a normal distribution, it means it is more appropriate for you to use what? Quantile regression. If you use OLS and then you realize that your data, you have problem of multicollinearity or correlation, multicollinearity with your variable, some of the variable, and maybe that variable was included, then it is more appropriate that you go and use similarly unrelated regression. Or when you notice that you have autocorrelation, I'm missing this and that. Autocorrelation, autocorrelation, I'm missing them up. Autocorrelation problem with your variable. Then it is more appropriate that you use what? What do they call? Generalized least square or feasible generalized least square. So the thing is that the problems you might have with your data will determine the approach you should use.
Yes,
okay. Let's say you are using AIDM model. Okay. Once once your interest was that, oh, AIDM model does this, that, and it also helps you to determine long run and short run relationship. Then after you have done that, you notice that after performing the diagnosis test, you have problem with normality or autocorrelation, whatever that thing. Then it means that you have to use another approach to resolve that problem. It means you cannot rely completely on the AIDM model. Let's say after you have done the AIDM model, you notice that your problem, your data, your model has a problem with what? Stability. You do your consume test, the consume test, and you notice that your model has a problem with what? Stability. What do? It means that it is more appropriate for you to use what? A threshold, a threshold regression, or you use another method that I think it can resolve that problem. That's in terms of you decide on the method, that's what you have to do. So always you have to make sure that you are testing for the diagnosis and make sure that those problems with your data don't exist before you can decide on it.
Oh, okay, so Doug, I was going to ask you how do we have...
I'm coming. Before you ask your question, let's look at this. Let's say you have a data. When you did your test, you notice that there's no long-run relationship with your data.
Yeah.
Okay. And so after you did you notice, oh, there's no long-run relationship. What do you have to do? It means that you have to perform short-run relationship. So in this case, the best method for you to use is to use VAR. VAR is for short run.
Yeah.
You understand? So I don't know what happens. The problem you might have with your data will tell you the best method you should use. Because if your data has, if you do the test and there's no long-run relationship among the variables, you should have to use VAR and also Granger causality test. Those ones. Okay. Your question.
Okay, so I was going to ask, how do we have a rigorous kind of results? And then the idea of we using one model post estimations, and then we try to use another model to fix the problems we uncover during our post estimation test, right? So can that one lead us to having a rigorous results?
Oh, I think it's not necessarily. The thing is that the rigor, yes, but no, I'll add another one too. This is it. Let's say when you use it, yes, when you do the first, you use one particular test in your result with your your analysis. We use one approach. After that, you want to validate the robustness of your results, so you use another approach. That is fine. But there's another ways you can also use to examine the robustness of your result. That is also what? Introducing other variables into the same model. So what you do is that maybe in the, let's use the economic growth thing. Let's say your first model, you use GDP per capita, okay, as your proxy for economic growth. Then you run the impact of FDI on it. Okay. Then you want to examine the robustness of your result. You can then use a different method to run the same model again to just validate that or verify that your results are robust. That is one. But you can also then decide that you are going to change the dependent variables. You are then going to use what? Different variables, different indicator. So in this case, you are going to use the annual GDP, or let's say you are now going to say, you are going to disaggregate the economic growth. So you are going to look at the economic growth from what? Agric, industry, and service.
Okay, more like sectorial.
Then after that, you run a regression, use a different model on that data. That also makes your result robust.
That also makes your results robust. So meaning there are two key ways to make your results robust. Either
or you can also introduce other variables. What you have to understand is that, see, let's say we're talking about FDI. In your model, the first model that you run, you don't have governance indicators or quality of government, institutional quality indicators in the variable. If you want to ensure that your work or your result is more robust, you will do another estimation. By this time around, you include what? Those institutional quality indicators in that model. Then you run. Okay? Then also, you can also move on to introduce another variable like economic freedom. Okay? Economic freedom. So economic freedom is also an indication that shows how free individuals in the country can what? Transfer their resources or move their resources about or carry out and get engaged in economic activities. So you can also look at economic freedom in your what? Together with what? FDI. You can introduce it into it as a control variable. You understand? Or you can even look at the relationship between the two of them. Do you understand?
Sure.
Yeah, so that's so many ways you can use to ensure that your results are robust. That's why I'm saying that once you do all those things, it makes your work some complexity. It makes it complex. That normally, let's say somebody just do a work and use normal do correlation, do descriptive statistics, correlation, and then OLS. Then you do all these things that we have said here. It means your work is more complex than the one who use OLS. So the thing is that if the previous studies use OLS, then in your work you are going to say in your work that in your work you are going to say that you are going to do this and that makes your work more what? Unique.
Okay, Doug, I think for the sake of time, maybe you can give a minute comment on this. Someone wanted to know if it is okay to use both static and dynamic models on the same objective. On the same objective, you carry out a static model analysis, and then you also use a dynamic model on the same objective, the same variables.
Yeah. You know, let me tell you something. I think this question, whoever brought this question has done well. The last time I remember, there was something I was trying to discuss with you. Look at this one, this method. Fixed effects, okay? Fixed effects and random effects. Well, you can use them. But what you have to understand is that when you are using the fixed effect and random effect, what it does is that it treats the time indifferent variable or the country-specific variables, it treats them as what? Nuisance. It takes them as non-necessary. So it doesn't account for those variables, even though they are in it. They are restricted in a model. So if you use the fixed effect, if let's say you use the fixed effect model, now you can then come in with a more dynamic new model, recent model, like augmented mean group estimator. Okay. Or the augmented mean group estimator. Do you know what it does? What it does is that it accounts for unobserved common factors. So factors that are common within your cross sections that have not been accounted for, or that they affect what you have done, but it has not been accounted in the model. It will account for it. It will treat it. It will account for that particular this unobserved factors. It will give you a result, a coefficient for, and tell you that this unobserved factors, this is the effect it has. You get it here. So those models, you can do the linear one and do the dynamic one, and that static panel, and also do the dynamic panel and combine them.
Okay. With time, I'm not sure, but I think.
Any question?
So one last question on this methodology and then the models. So how do young researchers get to know of new and advanced models?
I think, you see, new ones and advanced models. The thing is that that's why there's a need to read. You need to read. As a researcher, reading should be a hobby to you. Reading it should be your hobby. So once you are, that's what I think in identifying the novelty of your topic, you have to look at what is the trend. Oh, this person used this person used that, this person used this. So the method that the previous studies have used, if you've been reading your literature very well, you will come across those new stuff. So sometimes you read a paper, and the paper will introduce a model that you have never heard of it before. That was the first time. So what do? You download that paper, you find time to read more. Then if there's somebody that you think you can consult to give you a further explanation, you do that. Because what you have to understand is that this work that we are doing, or this field that we are, teamwork is very important. So you have to rely on your team. You have to rely on other colleagues to also gain certain knowledge, because you cannot gain all the knowledge. So sometimes you have to consult. Oh, do you have any knowledge about this method? I heard of it the last time when I was reading this paper. Can you walk me through? If the person have an idea, the person will help you out. But this is how to get informed about new method. This is how to get it. See, whenever they introduce a new software, like updated version of Stata or eView, what you have to do is that go and check what are the new methods they've added. You get it? You have to go and find out what are the new methods that they've added, because always they add something new. They add new methods. There are certain methods, they are on paper, but some of the softwares cannot estimate them. You understand? Look at a model like functional coefficient. Functional coefficient, it was only Stata 11 that they included functional coefficient. Meanwhile, those who were in the mass field were using functional coefficient. They were using, what do they call it? They were using, Excel to do those kind of analysis. But when they released eView 11, they included functional coefficient. If you go to Stata, you will not find it there. So always you have to look at the softwares that we use, their updates. Whenever they come with new versions, they introduce, they tell them, oh, this new method has been added. This has been added. You can, once you get to know of the new method that has been added, you go online and find out whether maybe some other researchers have used that method in their work. If they use it, you download those papers and you read about it. You see, you have to know what is that method used for. Once you read about it, the next thing is you have to know how to what? Do the estimation. Then you can use them in your work. That's how you get informed about the new method.
Okay, Doc. I think we are far behind time. So I just comment on this while we wrap up. So for graduate students writing theses, writing papers for publication, what is the importance of collaboration? How do you encourage us to collaborate? How do you expect us to work together with each other? And yeah, any advice on that?
I think, as a researcher, you always have to know your strength, okay? You have to know your strength and weakness. What you should understand is that when you